Hello, my name is Chris Keyack with Keyack Technology Solutions. In this video today, I'm going to showcase the AI Cloud Fabrication Drawings functionality that was introduced in Tekla Structures version 2025. Now, in this video, I'm going to specifically demonstrate this from the metal building workflow point of view. You'll see here that I've already created a collection called MBS, and if I press the Collections button here at the upper right of the dialog box, you'll see that I've got a series of groups that contain different types of assembly drawings that I would commonly see in a metal building. Here, you'll see that I've got a couple cold form assemblies for my header and jam that have welded clips attached to them. I've got a hot rolled end wall column and rafter, and then I've even got a 3-plate column including the web drawing. So I've already cleaned these up and published these to the cloud, and the whole idea behind this functionality is that you're trying to train Tekla to take drawings that you've already cleaned up before across multiple jobs, store that collection out in the cloud, and then what'll happen is on future jobs, that cloud storage will then compare against the properties of different assemblies in your current model, and it'll try to automatically identify and map which drawings you've cleaned up in the cloud with which pieces that you're trying to make drawings in the model, and automatically smart create and clone from that. So this is a pretty big piece of functionality and a feature, especially if you don't have the technical knowledge of trying to set up all the assembly drawing properties and things from scratch. Now, in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I make my drawings using my settings. I'll clean up one of those drawings so you can still see the amount of time that I still have to clean things up. I'll publish that to the cloud, and then I'll recreate the drawings purely from the cloud and see how well the functionality works. Okay, so let's go ahead and create an assembly drawing of this rafter the good old-fashioned way using the master drawing catalog and some of the predefined settings that I've already created. Now, to do this, we'll go up here to the master drawing catalog after selecting the web of that rafter here in the model. Now you can see that there are the MBS settings, and I've even created my own company specific settings that only make certain types of assemblies in the model. Like I don't need purlins and girts, for example, here. I just need the structural or primary frame essentially in the model. Now what I'm going to do is I've selected that piece, I'll just right click and say create drawings. So what that'll do is it'll go through and create the primary assembly drawing as well as the web drawing for me based on that rafter. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up the document manager, and we should see those two new drawings that got created. There's the RF1-2 and then the RF1-2-1 drawing, which is the web drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up each one of these drawings, and then I'm going to publish them to the cloud so that way we can try to tell Tekla to automatically clone these and automatically create the drawings from the cloud rather than me having to manually clean up the drawings like I'm going to show you now. Alright, so I'll open up RF1-2 drawing into the drawing editor here, and we'll just start to go through and clean things up. So over on the left-hand side, this 3 7/8 dimension, I would probably tighten this up, move this up here, and this dimension here, instead of going to the top of the plate, I want it actually there to the hole. Now, when I click on the dimensions, I do want to see these thumbtacks. I don't want to see a thumbtack that's got a hidden line with a question mark on it, because then it means that it is not associated to a specific point or corner of an object in the drawing. And that would actually be bad for the Smart Create and bad for cloning. So if you're going to manually add dimensions or tweak or adjust dimensions, as you do so, you want to see these thumbtacks, these magenta thumbtacks here, basically look like this solid color and not have a question mark on them. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just flip this dimension here so it goes to the outside. Everything else looks pretty good there. And then this is a rafter, so all the running dimensions are going to the left side of the plates based on my dimensioning rules, so that looks good. And let me actually just showcase that. Where did the dimensioning rules for this assembly drawing come from? Well, if I double click on the background, that opens up the drawing properties. Here on the view creation node towards the left in this tree view, you'll see that you can control which views automatically get generated. Right now, I'm telling Tekla to only create the main front view of the assembly, and it's going to be using this RF assembly main view properties that have been saved away. Now, how do I go edit those view properties? Well, I'll select on this rule and I'll press the view properties button. That opens up the separate dialog box. And when that opens up here, you're going to see that there is a dimensioning tab. And this is where all of my dimensioning rules are set up to control how clips are getting dimensions versus, say, stiffeners, or how end plates don't get running dimensions because they're located differently than how a clip would be. You'll notice that the flange brace clips, there's a rule in there to not dimension to those because those will be in line with the purlin clips up on the top of the rafter. So all of these rules here are my attempt to try to automate and match the MBS drawing properties as much as possible. But as you can see, I was starting to clean up a couple things that I can't 100% get done with those rules. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if you're going to do cloning and this smart crate like I'm doing here, then what you might do is sometimes it's not always beneficial to have automated dimensioning when you're cloning, because sometimes it'll start to add dimensions that you may have manually deleted when you do the cloning. So there are two different core strategies of cloning. One is to create a drawing with no dimensioning rules. So it's almost like you would delete all these rules out. You would select them and just say, delete these. Let me select the bottom one. So you would delete all those out, and then you would save some new view properties that say like, RF assembly main, no dimensions or something like that. And then you would set that here in the drawing properties and modify that drawing so that way there were like no dimensions as a starting point. Then you purely go through and you manually clean up and add dimensions completely yourself. And so all the dimensions would then be manually placed, and the cloning logic would purely look at your manual dimensions that you've added versus using a combination of manual adjusted dimensions and then automated dimensions using the rules. So that's really important. You're going to have to kind of troubleshoot and try out which methodology is going to be better for you, and look at the end results of the cloning and see which one provides the best results versus another. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I just wanted you to see the background of where do these dimensions come from as a starting point. Now, my methodology here is I'm going to attempt to just clean this up and then leave the automated dimensioning rules there, but clean it up manually and see how well the clone does in using a combination of the automated settings as well as my manually adjusted or added dimensions for the smart crate and the cloning process. All right, so I'll just go through and maybe I'll just keep adding and doing some cleanup here. Everything looks pretty good here on the left-hand side. The right-hand side, I would just get rid of this 3 7/8, and let's just go to dimensioning, and we'll do a parallel dimension here where I pick 2 points to define the edge that I want, and then maybe I'll just pick, and I want to be careful and make sure I just grab exact points that'll work. And I don't really need that 2-inch dimension, so I'll just right-click and say remove, and then I'll click on this and I'll right-click and say flip outside. And there we go. Now we've got the dimensions essentially in there that we want. That's got a thumbtack on it. I'll click on just some of these others, see how it's got all nicely the thumbtacks. If you don't see the thumbtacks, then press the Shift-A key on your keyboard, or Shift and A, and then you'll see that now look, I can't see the tacks when I click on the dimensions. So if I do Shift-A again, then click on that, now you'll see that the thumbtacks appear when I highlight a dimension. Okay, so everything looks pretty good, but I'm going to cut a section view here. So we'll go up to Views, I'll double click on Section View, and then over on the right-hand side in the Properties pane, I'll go to View, and then we'll go to the drop-down, and I'll choose RF Assembly Section. So those are the properties that I've saved away that I want to use as a starting point here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click up here on the clip because sometimes a flange brace clip might not be there. So I'm going to pick up here, and these first 2 points are my view plane. Then I'll pick the direction and the depth. Then I'll go down here, and this is the depth on the back side of the view plane. And then I'll pick the location to place my view. Now I'm going to click on the gray border here, which is the view border, and I can drag and move that around. And I just want to check the scales real quick. So the scale is 18 for that main view, and then here it made this secondary view 12. So maybe I'll make that 18 just to make these both match. So I've got that in there. This actually looks pretty good. It gave me an extra dimension, and if I want this to be really tight, maybe I'll drag these dimensions down. Again, I'm looking for those magenta thumbtacks to make sure that everything looks good there. This looks pretty good. Maybe I'll move it to the left, and then I can move this up here. And then if this is in the way, I can just hold down Shift and drag that around. And if I want maybe some overall dimensions here on the plate, then I can do that. Looks like I've already got that there for the the horizontal. So let me just do a vertical dimension there. Looks good. And then I'll just add the flange brace clip dimensions real quick. So we'll just come in here, go from the top, go to there, middle mouse button, do some horizontal dimensions here, middle mouse button, and there we go. Now we've got a really good starting point, and that pretty much looks like everything that I would probably clean up on this rafter. So you'll see that it still took me time to clean this up, right? Even though I got really good automated settings and it got me about maybe 90% of the way there, I still had to add some dimensions and clean some things up and cut this section and clean it up, which still cost me time. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down. I'll mark it ready for issuing so I can keep track of which drawings that I've cleaned up. and we'll see that there is that new drawing that we just cleaned up there. Now, I'm also going to clean up the web drawing. I'm probably not going to have you watch me do every piece of that, but here in the web drawing, it has a filtered assembly drawing here just showing the web parts. Now, if I window right to left just around the two web parts, I can then right click and say create single part views. And then what I do is I start moving this around. I change the scale of these. So like here on this one, this is a scale of 20. So then I just click on the internal views of the single parts and I just change those to 20, modify. And then now we just need to look at the orientation of these, which one goes where. So this one goes over to the right. This one goes to the left. Then I'll just come in here and add the additional dimensions. And then this starts to look like the traditional MBS web drawing. Okay, so I went through and cleaned up the drawings, but there's a couple things I see. So when I click on these dimensions here, you'll see that this one has a nice thumbtack that's solid. But then I've got a couple of dimensions here that are not. And so this is where if I click on this, you'll see that it doesn't associate to anything. So I'm going to try to click on that grip and drag it down to that point. And there we go. Now it turns into a solid point. And this is probably the assembly overall dimension that's getting messed up here. And it's looking kind of like maybe at the pre-cut lengths or something like that. So I'm just going to click this and make sure it gets onto an exact endpoint there. So that way I know that I'm going to get a grippable point. Looks pretty good here. Now, the only thing that I can also think of related to cloning is that this particular member has two webs. Sometimes you have one web and, maybe rarely or sometimes you might have three webs. So we'll see how well the cloning does on trying to take a two web assembly compared to a single web assembly. It might not completely clone very well. So again, the more examples and the more scenarios that you publish to the library on the cloud, the better the results are going to be. Okay, so now it's time to publish these two drawings out to the cloud. Here in the document manager, you can see these are the two drawings that I've just created and cleaned up, and the other ones are the drawings that I've already published to the cloud. Now, what I'll do is I'll go back up here to the AI Cloud Fabrication Drawings button. I'll have those two drawings selected. I'll then go up here to my collection. Now, once the collection opens up here, you'll see that these buttons will be highlighted, the plus and the minus, if there's drawings selected in the document manager. Now, what I'll do is I'll press the add button here, and then it will add and show a messaging here at the bottom that it's processing those drawings. You can then review and choose whether or not it should add those automatically to a new group, or you should tell it to automatically add it to an existing group. But here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the review button so you can kind of see what that process is. There's the two drawings that it's trying to add, and it's trying to actually add it to a new group here. So if I want this to specifically be like a 3-plate rafter, then what I'll do is I'll actually go to this drop down here and I'll say define new library name, and I'll call this 3-plate rafter. And then I'll just go ahead and say plus, so it'll add that. Then in this drop down here, I can go ahead and choose that as well. And then I'll say accept, and then it'll process here for a second and create that new group and add those two drawings to that group or that library. Okay, so now that new group or library has been added. So I'll go ahead and close this down, and I'm going to delete all the drawings. So I'm going to select all these drawings here that I've already created, and I will delete these out. And the reason is because I want to test and see how well the new AI Cloud Drawings feature works. So what I'm going to first need to do is I'm going to set a selection filter here. So I'm going to go down to my drop down, and I'm going to look for this MBS shop drawings. So scroll down here, and it looks like I've got this MBS shop drawings by name minimum. So this is something I just created here. And when I open this filter up, it basically allows me to choose which assembly names do I want to make shop drawings for. So I'm going to press apply and OK. And if I window around the model, you'll see that it highlights only the steel of the things that I want to make assembly drawings from. And so that makes sense. I don't want any, Gert and Perlin drawings because there's nothing special about those. We'll just cover that in our cold form report and on the shipper. But everything else here, because I've got welded clips on the jambs and the header, and I've got my hot rolled end walls, and then I got my 3-plate, rigid frames here. I want to go ahead and create drawings from this. Now to do that, we'll test this out by going back to AI Cloud Fabrication Drawings. And then here it's going to show you a preview of it scanning against the things that you have selected in the model against the actual parts that are out in the cloud that we just worked with. Now here you can see that there's a series of type W drawings. I don't really want those here, so let's see if there's some controls on that, and there is, just like in the normal Smart Create and Create Fabrication drawings. I'll uncheck parts so that way those type W drawings are not shown here. That looks really good. And this is awesome. Check this out. It's automatically detecting, so the artificial intelligence is working. We'll see here on the left, or the second column, that's actually showing you the name of the assemblies that are highlighted and selected in the model. And then here on the right, it's saying which drawing out in the cloud and which library or group is it going to try to automatically clone from. So I'm not going to change anything else. I'm just going to go ahead and press create, and then we'll take a look at how well the drawings look after it's been done. Now, I'm expecting these drawings to honestly be very, very clean and almost perfect, because this is actually the pieces in the model that I made those cloud-based drawings from. So I'm hoping the cloning is going to look really good. But it showcases the full circle of, all right, I cleaned the drawings, manually, published them to the cloud. Now I'm testing to see how well the Smart Create works. It looks like the identification of the assemblies matching the drawings in the cloud was spot on. That's what we're seeing here. And then we're going to take a look at the cloning results itself. Okay, so here's the results of the cloning from the cloud. Here we can see that there's a cloning source column, and that is really neat. It actually tells you which drawing out in the cloud that it cloned from, and that is really great for you to be able to validate and verify that it did the selection process correctly. And it also says that drawing was cloned from the cloud. That's also nice to know the difference between something that was cloned just internally in this model, or if it was cloned actually out from the cloud. Now, the one thing here is that I noticed that I did get the web drawings, but I didn't get my main assembly drawing. So this is something I'm going to have to try to figure out, in that the cloning on the cases of where there's 2 assembly drawings per assembly mark, because I have my web drawing and I have 2 separate assembly drawings for that one piece mark. Well, it looks like the Smart Create didn't automatically detect how to do that, and I do have that set up in the master drawing catalog. Now, I just want to see how well the clone worked. So if I open this up, you'll see here that the cloned drawing looks really good. Let me just take a look at this other web drawing. Okay, so this one didn't do so good. Like, this actually doesn't look very good here. So my natural instinct would be to double click on the background and say recreate, and tell it to try to recreate the drawing. And then of course I'm going to have to manually clean that up and add the single part views. So I do want you to see that when certain things don't go as expected, you can start to understand that, oh, I can always go back and recreate the drawing using the automated drawing settings versus the cloning and the Smart Create from the cloud. So I'm going to close this down, and let's just take a look at some of the other items here. So let's look at this end wall rafter here. And how does that look? That actually looks not too bad. Most of the dimensions are all there. The section was cut. A couple of things might need to be tightened up and cleaned up here, but this actually looks good. This saved me time. Doing 10 seconds of moving a couple marks around saves a little bit more time than having to cut that section manually and clean up everything from scratch. And then same thing here. I've got these running dimensions here. And then it looks like the bevel dimensions that I put on the original assembly, that didn't come across. But everything else looks pretty good here. So again, this is one of those things where you have to sort of figure out the art form. Does it make sense to start with the automated dimensioning and then manually clean things up that you need to? Or do you clone from the cloud and take drawings you've cleaned up before and then just deal with some of the small fine tweaks and things that you need to do, whichever one is the more productive. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back up here to the AI Cloud Fabrication drawings. I'll go to my collections, and I'm going to show you how I actually moved the web drawing into a separate web drawing collection or library here. And so what I'll do is you'll see that I actually did that on the 3-plate column. Now I'm going to go into the 3-plate rafter. So when I open that up, you can click on the drawing list here towards the right, and you'll see that there's the web drawing and the 3-plate assembly drawing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say move to another library on the web drawing. And then I can pick on that web drawing library and say move. And now it'll take this out of there, out of the 3-plate assembly for this column or for this rafter. And now it's just got the rafter drawing for the main drawing, and then the web drawings are in their own collection or library by themselves. So with that being said, I'm going to close this down, and I can see that there are the 2 drawings here in the web drawings category. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this down, and I just want to see if I can actually recreate those assembly drawings or not. Okay, so I've highlighted the rigid frame column and rafters here in the model, and then I'm going to delete these 2 existing drawings. And with these pieces selected in the model, we'll go back up to the AI Cloud Fabrication drawings option. Here it'll scan back through the cloud and it finds 3-plate column as well as hopefully 3-plate rafter here. Okay, so looks good. And then I'll just go ahead and press the create button. Now when it does this, it should hopefully make the drawings from those groups now that I separated the webs out of there. And so when I come back and look in here, let's just open up this RF1-1 drawing. And the clone looks pretty good. It's got almost all the dimensions there. The only strange thing that I'm noticing here is that it is including the container views from the web drawings. I'm not sure why it's doing this. This is something I'll have to report across to Tekla. This essentially shouldn't happen because these container views for the web views on a web drawing should not be in here at all. So I'll have to kind of ask Tekla what's going on with that. But let's assume that that didn't happen and that the normal clone worked here. Everything in general looks fairly close. Looks like it put all the dimensions and the section is in there and it's got everything shown exactly how I expected. So, looking at this clone, this would have saved time using the cloud-based AI and the Smart Create versus trying to create this drawing from scratch, other than this just strange container view issue that we have. Now, I don't think that we have solved the complete issue though, and that I also need those web drawings made. So let's see if I can highlight these two drawings, highlight the parts in the model, then go back up to the AI fabrication drawings, and you'll see that it says a drawing already exists for this product. And so this is where I was hoping that if I came to the drop-down list, could I choose a different set of settings and just see if like those web settings would have worked. And I actually even tried to delete the web settings here in order to see if those container views on the assembly drawing that we're just looking at would stop happening. So that's why you don't see the web in the dropdown anymore. But I did do a test too that if I had a rule group or a cloning set of drawings for web, which if you come up here to the drawing properties, I want you to see something. If you go in here to the dropdown, there's this bill of material 3-plate assembly web. What's key on this is that there's a sheet number of 1, whereas the regular bill of material 3-plate assembly has a sheet number of 0. This is how I basically tell Tekla in the master drawing catalog to make the main assembly drawing as the first sheet number and then the web drawing as a second sheet number starting at like 1. That's what this sheet number basically designates. It looks like the AI Smart Create and the cloud-based assembly drawings functionality, it does not understand that that 0 or that 1 is set in the cloning templates that get pushed up to the cloud. And so it will not let me get past this. A drawing already exists, and it will not let me create another drawing using the web settings, even though the save settings have a sheet number of 1 instead of 0 in there. So that's something that I'll, again, report that across to Tekla, have them take a look at, because the out-of-the-box traditional create fabrication drawings and the Smart Create functionality that's in here that will try to detect existing drawings in the model, this actually does work with multiple assembly drawings. I've seen it where it'll actually clone a web drawing and the main assembly drawing, and it lists multiple drawings at once in this create from option. It just doesn't look like that's been quite enabled or put into the cloud-based assembly drawing and Smart Create yet. But either way, you can see that there's a good starting point of how this functionality works, and you can continue to build your own library across multiple jobs. It might take a little bit as you go, but as you do more and more types of jobs, different types of column and rafter assemblies, and different shapes and types of those, and the more you continue to publish those out to the cloud, you can then tell Tekla to train or learn from all those all those drawings that you publish to the cloud and try to automatically clone for you, rather than having to clean up the first couple of drawings on each job and then manually Smart Create or clone from that.